So there's a part of this whole Iran deal that almost every news report is missing. And I want to explain it to you because what actually happened in that room over the weekend, it's not what they're telling you. And look, I know stuff like this gets buried fast. So if you want to keep hearing the parts the big networks skip, go ahead and subscribe. That's the whole point of this channel. So there's a part of this whole Iran deal that almost every news report is missing. And I want to explain it to you because what actually happened in that room over the weekend, it's not what they're telling you. Most people heard the headline today and moved on. Oman and Iran, they're close to a short-term deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The fighting's paused, oil prices are down. Sounds like good news, right? I spent the morning going back through exactly what happened in Washington and Tehran over the last 72 hours. And the more I read, the clearer it got that this wasn't diplomacy. This was an intervention. Let me walk you through it. So here's where we are right now. For almost 2 weeks, the United States has been hitting Iran with nightly airstrikes. We're talking about military infrastructure, coastal surveillance systems, missile and drone facilities, naval assets, the whole package. And Iran wasn't just sitting there taking it, they were hitting back. Strikes on neighboring countries that host U.S. bases, attacks on shipping in the Strait. Every night, back and forth, back and forth. Then Friday night, everything stops. No more U.S. strikes, no more Iranian retaliation. Just silence. Now you tell me, does that sound like a coincidence to you? Because I don't buy it for a second. Look, I've been covering this conflict since it broke out on February 28th. And the one thing I've learned is that nothing happens by accident in this part of the world. Every pause, every silence, every diplomatic breakthrough has a price tag attached to it. Here's what actually happened. The Wall Street Journal reported that Oman and Iran accelerated talks over the weekend to reopen the strait. Oman is keeping Washington informed, but the U.S. isn't directly participating. That's what they're telling you. But there's another layer. Oman didn't just show up in Tehran on Friday night by accident. They were invited. Think about the timing for a second. The U.S. military had been bombing Iran for 13 straight nights. 13. And then suddenly, on Friday night, Trump halts the attacks. An Omani delegation flies into Tehran that same night. And by the end of the weekend, they're close to a deal. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to connect those dots. This was orchestrated. Now, what's actually on the table? Because this isn't a peace deal. Let's be clear about that. The Wall Street Journal explicitly says these talks aren't meant to put a full stop to the U.S.-Iran conflict. This is a short-term fix. But here's where it gets interesting. The whole thing hinges on the Strait of Hormuz. You know, that narrow waterway where about 20% of the world's oil used to flow through before the war. Iran has been trying to control that strait for months. They want to charge fees for ships passing through. They want to administer the shipping lanes. Basically, They want to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a toll road for the entire global economy. And the U.S. has been saying, absolutely not. We're not paying you to move oil through international waters. That's been the whole fight. So what changed? Why is Oman suddenly able to bridge a gap that was impossible just days ago? Here's what I think happened. And I'm just telling you what I pieced together from the reporting. So make up your own mind. The U.S. bombing campaign had reached its limit. Military officials were warning that they were running out of pre-selected targets in the strait, and they were getting nervous about their own supplies of interceptors and munitions. They were burning through inventory faster than expected, and Iran was still holding the strait. For all that bombing, Iran's de facto control over the waterway haven't been broken. So the U.S. needed an off-ramp. They needed something that looked like a diplomatic win, even if it wasn't. And that's where Oman comes in. Now, Oman has been playing this really interesting role throughout the conflict. They're a Gulf state, they're aligned with the U.S. in some ways, but they've also maintained decent relations with Iran. They're the perfect intermediary. So Oman goes to Tehran with a proposal. And here's what the proposal actually is, based on what I'm reading. Iran's position has been that they want to control the strait and charge fees. The U.S. position has been absolutely no fees. So what's the compromise? The reports I'm seeing say Oman is floating the idea of a regional consortium, a group of Gulf states that would somehow manage security in the strait and cover the costs so Iran doesn't get to just pocket the fees directly. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like paying Iran not to cause problems. It's protection money dressed up in diplomatic language. And the Iranians, they're not dumb. They know exactly what's happening. They've been using the threat of closing the strait as leverage, and it's working. Think about what Iran has accomplished here. They've held one of the most important waterways in the world hostage, and now they're getting a Gulf-funded consortium to manage it in a way that presumably benefits them. And they didn't even have to back down on their core demand. I mean, who's really winning here? Because it sure doesn't look like the United States. Now, there's another piece to this that I think is even more important. And this is the part that gave me pause when I read it. The Strait of Hormuz deal is happening while Trump is about to meet with Netanyahu. Tomorrow, actually. The two of them are sitting down at the White House, and this deal is the backdrop. And let me tell you, Netanyahu is not coming to Washington to talk about the weather. He's coming with his own agenda. Think about this. Netanyahu has been pushing for the U.S. to get more aggressive with Iran for years. He was literally making that pitch in February, just before the war started. And now the U.S. is backing off and trying to negotiate a temporary deal while he's in town? How do you think that's going to play out? I don't think Netanyahu is going to be happy about this. I think he sees the Strait of Hormuz deal as the U.S. selling out, basically, letting Iran get away with it. And Trump is in a tough spot because he's got his own re-election campaign and the midterms coming up. He wants a win. He needs something to show his base that says, I handled Iran. So you've got Netanyahu pushing for military action. You've got Trump wanting a diplomatic achievement. You've got Iran playing for time and leverage. And you've got this fragile, temporary deal hanging in the middle. This is the kind of situation where one wrong move sends everything crashing down. And here's the thing. The deal that's being negotiated right now, it's not a solution to anything. It's a pause. The Wall Street Journal report says Oman and Iran are still far apart on some issues, especially whether to charge transit fees. So the agreement they're supposedly close to, it's not even an agreement on the core problem. It's an agreement to have more talks, to kick the can down the road. Maybe that's the best that can be hoped for right now. Maybe a temporary fix is better than nothing. But let's not pretend it's a victory. And the global economy, it's still holding its breath. Oil prices dropped when the strikes paused, but analysts are warning that any recovery in shipping will be gradual and incomplete. Shipping operators are still cautious. They want stronger safety assurances before they send their vessels back through that waterway. This is the real cost. You've got the world's economy still kind of limping along, afraid to use one of the most important shipping lanes on the planet because nobody knows if a missile is going to come screaming in from the Iranian coast. And let me just say one more thing about Iran's position, because I think it gets misrepresented. Iran is not looking for peace. They're looking for concessions. They've said, and I'm quoting, that they'll halt attacks as long as the U.S. maintains its pause. But they're also expressing more skepticism than optimism about the lull. They think the U.S. pause is tactical rather than genuine. They're not stupid. They know the U.S. isn't going to just let them control the Strait of Hormuz indefinitely. But they also know they have leverage, and they're using it. There's also this weird angle where Iran is apparently trying to use the U.S. midterm elections to pressure Trump. The Wall Street Journal reported that Iranian officials think Trump's desire to secure an achievement before November will make him more willing to offer concessions. I mean, think about the audacity of that. A foreign adversary openly trying to manipulate our internal politics. And it might actually work, because Trump is desperate for wins right now. This whole thing is a mess. So let me ask you the question that's been sticking in my head all day. What happens when the pause ends? Because it will end. It always does. These temporary deals, these ceasefires, these diplomatic expedients, they buy time. But they don't solve the underlying problem. The problem is Iran wants to control the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. says it can't, and neither side is willing to give ground. So whatever Oman cooks up, whatever consortium they create, whatever fees are charged or not charged, it's all just a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound. And while they're playing these diplomatic games, the world's energy supply is still vulnerable. The global economy is still on edge. And the next time someone launches a missile or fires a torpedo, we're right back to where we were 2 weeks ago. Maybe worse. Look, I'm not saying diplomacy is pointless. I'm not saying we should go back to bombing. I'm saying that this deal, this reported breakthrough, is not what it appears to be. It's not peace. It's not stability. It's not the end of the U.S.-Iran conflict. It's a pause, a moment to catch your breath before the next round. And what really worries me is that people are going to hear the headlines and think the crisis is over. They're going to move on, stop paying attention, assume everything is fine. But it's not fine. It was never fine. And it's not going to be fine anytime soon. Because the fundamental issue, Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz, that hasn't been resolved. The U.S. hasn't backed down from its position. Iran hasn't backed down from theirs. They've just agreed to pretend they're not arguing for a little while. And in the meantime, the world economy is going to operate on a lot of hopes and maybes. Oil shipments might resume. The straits might be safe. The fighting might not escalate again. Might is a terrifying word to base global energy policy on, don't you think? You know, I keep coming back to one detail from this whole thing. The Wall Street Journal report said Oman is keeping Washington informed, but the U.S. isn't directly participating in the talks. Think about that. The United States, the world's superpower, the country that just spent 2 weeks bombing Iran, is sitting on the sidelines while a small Gulf state negotiates with its adversary about a vital global shipping lane. That tells me something important. It tells me that the U.S. wasn't in a position of strength here, that the bombing campaign had reached its limit, that Iran's position, however untenable it might be, was still strong enough to force a diplomatic solution that didn't satisfy U.S. demands. And that's not a good sign for the months ahead. But here's what I really want you to take away from this. The deal that's being reported is a snapshot. It's a moment in time. It doesn't tell you where things are going. What it tells you is where things are right now. And right now, the U.S. and Iran are in a kind of standoff. Neither side is willing to escalate further, but neither side is willing to back down either. So they're passing messages through Oman, through Pakistan, through Qatar. They're having conversations that aren't really conversations. They're making gestures that aren't really commitments. And the whole world is just kind of waiting. That's not a solution. That's a holding pattern. And you know who's going to pay for this holding pattern? Not the politicians, not the diplomats, not the generals. It's going to be regular people. People who need fuel for their cars. People who need goods that are shipped through the Gulf. People whose jobs depend on a stable global economy. So when you hear the news that Oman and Iran are close to a deal, and oil prices are dropping, and everything seems calm for a moment, don't believe it. Don't let yourself relax, because this isn't over. It was never over. And the people who are telling you it's over, they're not telling you the whole truth. So keep watching, keep paying attention, because the next headline, the one that follows this pause, the one that comes after the deal is signed or collapses or gets replaced by something else, that's the one that's really going to matter. And I'll be here to walk you through it. Anyway, that's what I've got for you today. I'll keep digging into this as things develop. And if you want the real breakdown, not the headlines, you know where to find me. Now, before I go, drop a comment and tell me what you make of all this. Because honestly, I went back and forth on this one myself, and I'm curious where you land.